Hi there, you're listening to the Estranged Heart podcast, and I'm your host, Kreed Revere. Welcome back to our returning listeners, and if this is your first time here, thank you for selecting this podcast to listen to. As we begin today's episode, I invite you to grab a cup of coffee or tea, settle in, and listen with an open heart. But first, the regular disclaimer. I am not a licensed therapist or counselor. Nothing within this podcast should be considered or taken as therapy. If you are in need of therapeutic support such as counseling, please seek out a therapist near you. Hi there, thanks for joining us again today for another episode of The Estranged Heart. A couple of announcements and reminders. The Moving Beyond Family Struggles Summit is less than a month away now, and if you are interested in registering for that event, it is online. It is free. It will run over the course of 4 days, October 12th through the 15th. And there are 30 estrangement experts that will be speaking at this event. I will be speaking on I think it's day 3. And so if you're interested in that, link is in the bio. And I also have a link on the Estranged Hearts Instagram page that you can click there as well if that is more convenient for you. Our discussion group for estranged parents and estranged adult children is going really well. AC and I are facilitating that, and if you're interested in joining that group, there is an application process, and just email me for an application and I'm happy to send that to you. Again, the email address is in the show notes. Also, I will be starting, and it's support groups, Zoom support group for estranged moms and another for recently reconciled moms. In October, it will be structured differently than it has been in the past, and there will be a minimum number of participants that we'll need to have for each group in order to get it started. So if you're interested in that, please email me at theestrangedheart@gmail.com. Happy to get you on the list. And when that information goes out, it'll go out by email and will be available on all my social media platforms as well. So if you're an estranged mom, you're looking to find a support group, an estranged mom or reconciled mom, you're interested in finding a support group that is more than just a place to go and, word vomit all of the pain involved with estrangement and or reconciliation, and you're interested in learning and growing and changing behaviors and patterns, trying to find answers to questions you've had, then this might be a support group for you. My support groups are vastly different than most others, and there is a learning process. There's homework that is given, etc. It's not just a place to come and commiserate together. While that is a part of what we do, it is not the main focus. So if you're interested in that, feel free to email me, and I'm happy to get you on the list for that. And I think there's coaching that AC and I are offering together. So if you're interested in talking with a formerly estranged and now reconciled estranged parent parent or adult child, let me know. AC and I are happy to have a conversation with you, and you can get the 2 different perspectives, and how that will look and feel is similar to what you hear in our conversations here on the podcast. Email me for information about that if you're interested. And finally, don't forget to check out AC's podcast called In the Blood, and I will have a link to that in the show notes as well. Okay, on to today's episode. I think the topic that we want to cover today is about parenting. And how did you put it? What were you just talking about, AC? About, when parents parent because in a way that they wanted to be parented when they were children?
What's
How
the
did you
thing?
put
I
that?
think some parents, they look at their childhood and they think, wow, that sucked. I'm going to do not that.
Mm,
And in turn, they can't figure out why their kids are so like bunged up thinking, wow, my parents are pretty terrible at this. And I think really what it comes down to as it's so funny that we end up in this situation because I literally just said before we started recording, just so everybody knows that we were going to botch this intro super, super bad. And here we are. I'm stumbling and I make no apologies.
that's right.
No, but we can end up in a situation where we're kind of like parenting from a place where we're trying to give our kids the ideal childhood, or at least what would have been ideal for us as individuals,
Right.
without recognizing that it's a terrible fit for them,
Mm,
because we're different people than they are.
hmm.
There's so many things that enter into this, like even some of the drawing from the experiences that our parents had given us. Like if I'm going to personalize it, I look at my parents did so many things wrong and I made conscious decisions. I'm never going to do that when I have kids. And sometimes I was right. Sometimes, well, surprise, I am my parents.
Hmm.
Then there's these other times again where it's like I look at things that they did and I think, wow, these are super awesome things that I really, really want to emulate, not realizing that these things weren't super awesome for me or for anybody else. They sucked way less than the other things that were brought to the table. It's just being parented is such a mixed bag of experiences.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, like we try to draw on that mixed bag without even having a clear understanding of where our parents were coming from, where they were going, what they were even freaking doing. And we think this is going to be my primary resource for my parenting model, whether it's like how to or how not to,
Mm.
instead of just thinking, instead of looking at how I was raised, maybe I should look at the needs that my kids have and taking it from there. Anyways, that's my everywhere and nowhere at once attempt to put the topic on the table. Tell me if I've landed at all.
Yes, yes, you have. Absolutely. Yes. So I think we venture into this topic sometimes when we're talking about the differences in parenting from one child to another, right? I know this is something that I talk about in my support group for estranged moms. We're talking about we may have an introverted child and an extroverted child, and but yet we're parenting them the same. And we don't recognize that each child is an individual and each child needs something different brought to the table. And when we are coming from our own childhoods where we have had traumas or we have not received the things that we wanted as children, we tend to do this, and I see this so often. We, because we are just so upset that we didn't get what we needed, that we go to the opposite end of the spectrum, right? There's like this, well, they did it this way, and I'm gonna go all the way over here and do it the complete opposite. And I don't know about you, but I have found in life that for the most part, anytime we go from one extreme to another, we're still behind the eight ball, where we need to come back into balance with things a little bit more. So what what would that look like if we were to try to help a parent to see where they parented from that perspective of things that they didn't get, right? We hear parents say a lot, well, you want to talk about abuse, let me tell you about abuse, right? And again, that's kind of the things that they didn't want to do, so they provided for their children in ways that they didn't get. So how do we help them to see that maybe the way that they're going about that, and I guess it's even for the adult children at this point who have children of their own, how do we get them to see or notice am I doing this because this is what's best for my child? Or did I do this because it was what I wanted?
This seems like such a simple couple of questions, but as you're asking them, I'm like, it's like glass shattering when I'm thinking of like all the different little fragments of
Mm,
answers that are gonna like maybe bring some clarity into this. I was talking to a family member. I don't want to indicate which type of family member, but because I don't want to embarrass anybody, but this family member was expressing concern that their kids were, their words, turning into garbage people.
mm,
And I said, well, what do you think you need to do to adjust that trajectory? And they had said, well, I've done everything that wasn't done for me. All the things that led to me being a garbage person, I didn't do any of that stuff. And if anything, my kids are even worse than I was.
mm,
And they really couldn't make sense of this. And I had referred them to a podcast episode I'd listened to. I can't remember who the speaker was. I wish I remembered because his insights were so good. But this was a person who had grown up very, very poor in the
mhm,
US, like sort of lived in the projects, right?
mhm.
With very little access to anything other than gang life and poverty, violence, drugs,
Right.
and stuff. And he had worked relentlessly to get away from that, got an education, got to the point where you could afford a nice house in a nice neighborhood, nice cars, so you could send his kids when they came along to a nice school, safe environment. And he realized that his kids were again turning into like what my family member had described as garbage people.
Mhm,
There was nothing about their experience that was strengthening them, refining them, any of this. They just, they had been so sheltered from anything that might hurt that they couldn't develop anything that was a high value attribute.
mm,
And what this guy had done was something truly shocking, which was he sold the nice house in the nice neighborhood and he moved with his family back to the projects where he had started, because his thinking was if they grew up in that kind of external environment with a stronger, healthier internal environment, maybe they could get the best of both worlds. Whereas they were exposed to certain things that are tough,
mhm,
but at the same time, they could face these tough things because they were doing so with the support of a loving and insightful parent.
mhm.
So there is, I think, one strong component. I mean, I see this happening all the time with people. It's like I just want to give my kids what I never had,
Right. Right.
not realizing that part of the stuff you never had was really, really important experiences that'll toughen you up.
Mhm,
I think the cousin to this approach is, like if I think back on when I was a kid, I really, really liked Thundercats.
mhm.
I wanted the Thundercats lair. I wanted the action figures, the toys, all this other stuff, whatever, right? 80s kid stuff, big deal. So now I got kids now who have no idea what the hell a Thundercat is. Now, does it make sense for me to go and buy them Thundercats because I never
Mm,
had them? They don't
right.
appreciate them. They don't need them. They didn't ask for them. It's not going to give them fond memories. Oh, hey, dad's awesome. He gave me Thundercats. Like, they're just like, dad gave me a bunch of crap I had no use for.
Right.
Now, when our parenting model is based on this same ridiculous philosophy, well, what's going to happen? Our kids are going to grow up feeling unloved, unwanted. Emotionally, they're dealing with
Mm,
the same stuff I dealt with when I didn't get the Thundercat. They did get the Thundercat, and that hurt them just the same.
right.
I feel like I've been talking a lot. I'm going to shut up now.
Yeah. It's interesting because a conversation that happened in the support group I have for estranged moms just this past week was a mom who said she was not aware of why her child had estranged from her, and she went into a list of all the things that she had provided for her children when they were growing up. And I responded to her. She couldn't understand why they were upset. They had a quote better life than she did. Um, because she had provided all these things. And so my response to her was, while you provided things that you didn't have, their emotional needs were not met. Right. And when it comes to the emotional needs of children, you can't, what works for one isn't going to work for another. It's kind of like the whole Thundercats thing, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it is will work or it won't work. Um, and so she finally had that aha of, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, I never even considered the emotional piece of things. I had always just talked about, giving them the things that I didn't have growing up, the nice shoes, the designer clothes, the vacations, the, nice decorated bedroom, etc., a single bedroom without having to share it with a sibling and things like that. And, food on the table and things that she didn't have growing up. So when I think this is where the parents get sideways and are confused when the kids are like, you didn't provide me with the things that I needed. And the parents like, well, of course I did. I gave you everything I didn't have. And that's where this disconnect is at. And I'm like, how do we help parents and even again our estranged adult children who are parents? How do we help them to understand you can't live your life, go back and get a second chance at living your childhood through your child. You can't do that.
I think some parents, they get really hung up in this that thing you're talking about. Oh, I gave them everything,
Mm-hmm.
and they
Yep.
seem shocked that the kid doesn't appreciate it. And here's something that might shock a lot of people: you're never going to get somebody to say wow to what they perceive to be normal. All this stuff you
Mm,
do, this normal you've created, it's not
right.
outstanding or spectacular to them. It's just normal. They weren't there when you didn't have anything as a kid, and the reality is they don't give a shit.
Mm,
They shouldn't. Be thankful that they're like so detached from your humble beginnings that they don't have to
right.
worry about what it's like to go to bed hungry. Be
Right.
thankful that they don't have to appreciate a full tummy, that a full tummy is just expected.
Mm-hmm.
It's like vacations and a nice room and, the latest Polly Pocket or Tech Deck, whatever it is that kids play
Right.
with. Cool. The other thing I wish that more parents would understand, and again, maybe this is sounding like a dig on the parents because I'm speaking from the perspective of the adult child now,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not terribly impressed when you go down an inventory list and say, I did this and this and this and this, because giving everything is the bare minimum when you're a parent. I say that as a parent myself. I don't want a hero biscuit when I give my kids everything that's available to me, where I even squeeze myself a little bit for a bit extra, because giving them everything I have, including my youth, my frontal hairline, that is the bare minimum of doing an okay job.
Mm,
Now, when giving everything is the bare minimum, like, how do you attach an extra to giving
mm-hmm.
everything? I mean, you want to be a
Mm-hmm.
spectacular parent. At best, you're doing the bare minimum. So don't expect a parade in your honor. It's not going to happen. I think really what the goal should be is like find out what your kids actually want and what they actually need in the actual moment,
Right.
and try to work around that. And I think the thing that most people get hung up on, not just with kids, but with people in general, just relationships, that they tend to fall apart because of people operating according to the golden rule, which I will keep on
Yeah.
attacking over and over and over again until my dying day. You cannot treat other people how you want to be treated. You have to treat other people how they would like to be treated.
Yeah.
Your desires
Exactly.
are completely irrelevant. It might be a baseline when you're trying to establish what basic courtesy looks like.
Right.
But if you want to give somebody what they want, you got to take the time to get to know what that is and then do the work to give it to them.
Right.
Other relationships that might be an optional exercise with your kids, no. I don't care if it hurts and if it nauseates you. If they actually sincerely need it, give it to them.
Right. Right. I think that you've hit on the platinum rule, right? The platinum rule, treat others the way that they want to be treated. Um, and most older parents grew up with that golden rule being the rule, right? Do unto others as you would have done to you. And so it's this shift in thought, it's this shift in belief, it's this shift in perspective, in learning, being open to unlearning and then relearning something new, right? When I had I have done a podcast in the past on the platinum rule, and everyone, it's kind of like the whole validation. When I do the validation workshop, everyone is like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. Oh my gosh.
Hmm.
It's this revelation that happens with the parents because it's been nowhere on their radar. So when we come into, and I think that this is also, sorry, I'm a little all over the place too. When this we talk to parents about this, the kids have no respect for parents anymore. And I'm like, is it respect or is it obedience that you're asking for?
Mm.
Because from what I see, and I'm here, I mean, I hold my hand up. I was the parent who demanded respect. And I was very authoritarian. And it was, I've said before, my way or the highway, and you will give me respect or you will be out. It was that simple. And that wasn't respect that I was asking for and demanding. I wasn't asking for it, I was
You wanted
demanding it.
compliance.
I wanted compliance and obedience.
Yeah.
Do as I say, don't question me, don't ask, all of these other things, right?
Also, we were
Um,
taught, right?
exactly, exactly. And so in order to shift and move, we have to be open to this learning, unlearning that that we learned. And you mentioned before we started recording too, this talking about asking questions, right? When someone just asked you why you believe what you believed, and you were like, wow, well, I don't know, right? I have that conversation often with the parents. Why do you believe this? Why do you believe that your children should respect you? Well, that's what I was taught. Okay. And is it what you believe, or is it because this is what you were taught to believe?
That's actually a
Why
great
do you
question.
believe?
Who taught you and how well informed were they?
Correct. Correct. So if we take all of these beliefs that we've gathered into our little red wagon over the years, and we're pulling all these beliefs around, and we're tossing it out and telling our kids this is what they should do, and etc. And these beliefs are based off of, whether we take them as this is what I was taught, and so I'm going to take this with me into my parenting from the way that I was parented, or this is I was taught this and I'm not taking that with me, right? Well, why are you not taking it with you? What why? Where's the why behind what we are doing? Are we just so pissed off with the way that our parents have raised us that we're now just screw it, I'm going the other way? Well, why? Why does it have to go to the other end of the spectrum? Think about why you are doing something. Is it out of retaliation because you want to upset, show your parents, I can do it better than you?
Yeah, I think spite is a terrible motivator in that case.
Right, right, exactly. Figure out that why. When we go through life on autopilot or working from a place of spite, and I'll show you mentality, are we really providing healthy environments and healthy things to think about for our children? Are we modeling that for them? Healthy ways of being in relationship with others, and healthy understandings, and healthy, well, I wonder why so and so has been this way their entire life, right? Like, instead of just this assumption that we know, or this assumption that, well, I don't think that that's the right way, so therefore it's not the right way. When we didn't live in that time, we didn't live under those circumstances. We don't know what really transpired. And for a lot of the older parents, I mean, a lot of them have never shared with their children all the things that have happened to them when they were kids. So I think that we've kind of been a little all over the place with this today, but I think it's a valuable thing to be able to sit back and contemplate what and review. I didn't get this A, B, or C, right? Like I wanted that as a kid. I wanted my parents to spend time with me. I wanted mom to show me how to cook, etc., whatever. Dad to show me how to fix a car, whatever the case may be. And I didn't get it. But it doesn't mean that that's what my kid wants. It doesn't mean your kid is not you ever. They're not you. They may have traits and similarities to you, but they are not you.
Mm.
They're not you. They are their own individual human being. And so when we can get to a place in our life where we are curious and we can ask questions, and again, a lot of parents come from a time and place where they weren't allowed to ask questions, right? They came from a time and place when children were to be seen and not heard. I remember that distinctly, a story my mother tells about cousins of mine coming over to the house to visit. And my mother went to ask them if they wanted a glass of milk, and they were little, like 4, 5, 6 years old. And my uncle saying, no, they don't want anything, answering for them. No, they don't want anything. They are going to sit here and they are going to be quiet, is what they're going to do. And I just thought, wow, right? I mean, kids are naturally curious,
Yeah.
right? And now they've been mandated to shut up and not say anything. So how do they, that leads me to another question. This is what happens when I start diving down these going down these roads, is then the question is, how do we learn how to ask questions? How do we learn to be curious if we're told and taught in life to just be quiet, right? So if we put this in the context of parents, older parents, I'm curious. I've not gone down this road before, so allow me this little side jaunt, if you will. If your parent was raised in a way that was, you didn't question authority, which meant your parents, right? You couldn't push back on anything. You couldn't ask questions. How did they learn to be curious? When does that come into play?
This is some deep stuff you're diving into. I recently updated the biography on my webpage, and it wasn't like talking about the curiosity. For me, it was getting in touch with emotional expression,
Mm-hmm.
because every single emotional avenue was cut off to me. And at some point, I needed to figure out, how do I emote when I've never been allowed to?
Right, right.
And yeah, I'm sure everybody's got their own thing, right? I think a lot of our parents, they were parented in a way where like they were parented with a model that was based on a philosophical conundrum. Like
Mm,
my one of the things that jumps into mind is, okay, my mom was raised in South Africa,
mm-hmm.
and I don't know if anybody's familiar with South African culture, but it's a very, very bratty culture. That some of the sayings from Afrikaans don't translate well into English, but these people will run with the stuff anyways. And one of the sayings that was a recurring theme of my mom's childhood was, quote, those who ask don't get, and those who
Mm,
don't ask don't want.
wow.
Which I think it sort of paints that whole dog chasing its tail philosophy
Hmm.
that we're both like thinking about here. Is like,
Right.
where does that leave the kid?
Hmm.
And quite often I find that this sort of thing that you're describing, it's not just parents of like children, it's parents with adult children too, maybe even like parents who have children, and they're still taking the same ridiculous approach of like, I'm not going to tell you what the right thing is. Maybe there isn't a right thing. All I know is that everything that you do is bothersome in some way.
Right.
Can you please just stop dropping it in my lap? I had a recent brush with that myself with my mom, where I was trying to say like, look, some stuff came up for me recently. Can I ask you some questions? And her response was, at a certain point, this has just got to be allowed to die. Just let it go. I'm done talking about it. I'm thinking, well, shit, childhood wasn't the appropriate time to talk about it. Adulthood's not the proper time to talk about it. My therapist is telling me to talk to my mom. I I
Right.
become the next person's problem. If I go to my wife with this shit, she'd just be like, I don't know what to tell you.
Right.
And
Right.
dumping on my kids, that's not a good option either. But stewing on it with no place to go with it, that's kind of like the worst place of all. So I don't know. Maybe this is something we need to like ponder on, let it fester a little bit, see what comes up in the
Yeah.
coming episodes.
Yeah. And
Because
I
this
would
is
be,
definitely a big factor.
it is, and I would love to hear input from the listeners on this as well. Um, from, parents and children, adult children alike. Um,
I'm actually most curious to hear from parents who have like, sorry, children who are parents,
mhm. Right.
especially in the estrangement community, because I think people within the estrangement community typically they've spent more time thinking about things than people who are not estranged.
Yes.
And especially for the people that are in our group, that would actually be like great stuff to bring up there. Love to hear more from the parents in that context.
Yes.
you know Here's your chance to say your piece, and help us gain an understanding where you're coming from.
Right. Agreed. Agreed. Yeah, I think that this is, as we always talk about with estrangement, it's never one single thing. It's layers upon layers upon layers upon layers. Um, that even if it appears to be a singular event, it's not. It's there, it's stemming from something else. And so the same thing with parenting and parenting styles and what we're doing, it's layered, right? What are all of your feelings around the way that you were parented, and then how you're going to do it differently. And I hate to say it, but I think that um, so far history has proven that regardless of how hard we try to do it differently, we're still going to screw up somewhere along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we can hold some space for that for everybody involved, um, I don't know, what would that look like, right? I think it's um I think it's worth a conversation. I think the children having with the parents, look, I didn't want to do football all through middle school and high school. I did it because you insisted that I do it. Why? Why did you insist? Right? And I think a lot of parents would then say, well, I insisted because it's good for you, and it's group activities and socializing and things like that. And I would challenge that. I would challenge that, because I would then ask, oh, well, I wonder, was there a time when you wanted to play football and you weren't able to play football?
Yeah.
Right. Those kinds of questions, and those all come from that place of curiosity, to be able to sit and think and truly believe, maybe I don't know it all. maybe there is a way, a different way than what I've been told. Maybe there's a different way from what others have told me I should be doing, or what the experts say, or et cetera, et cetera. Right? No expert knows your children. They might have an idea of some things that are helpful, in general, but they don't know your kids. My question to you is, do you know your children?
Hmm.
And do you know your children as individual children?
And have you allowed them the room to get to know themselves?
Yes. Yes. Even more important. Yeah. I think on that note, that's a good place to stop. What do you think?
Personally, I would like to stew on that last series of
Mm,
questions.
yeah,
And I would imagine that anybody listening is probably stuck there too. So why don't we just drop it?
that sounds like a good stopping place for today. So once again, started off a little rocky, but we got it smoothed out there, and in the end, I would say yes.
We'll get better at this at some point, I'm sure, as far as like how to pitch an intro. I think both of us are just so used to talking by ourselves that
Yes.
when you put two of us together, it's like, oh, okay, now what?
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Awesome. Once again, thanks, AC. I appreciate it.
No, thank you.
This brings this episode to a close. I hope that this time together was time you feel well spent, and that you are able to find some takeaway nuggets to help you on your journey, wherever you may be on your estrangement and reconciliation path. If you feel you've received something helpful or positive from this podcast, please consider following us, sharing this podcast with others, leaving a positive review, perhaps entertaining becoming a guest on our show, or following us on social media on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok under the same name, The Estranged Heart. As a reminder, there is an online support group on Facebook. If you are a estranged mom who identifies as being spiritual and approaches estrangement with a sense of curiosity rather than blame and judgment, and desire to do inner self-work and reflection, please seek us out. We can be found at facebook.com/estranged mothers support group. And lastly, if you are an estranged parent or an estranged adult child and would like to have your story shared on the podcast, anonymously or not, please reach out to me via email at theestrangedheart@gmail.com.